Well, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever the world. My name is Dr. DAAM. This is Dr. DAAM Podcast, episode 49, not Groundhog Year. So I just wanted to, it's February 2nd here, still in the United States. Say hello to you all around the globe. Those of you in Canada fighting a good fight for the anti-tariffs. Those of you in Mexico fighting a good fight for anti-tariffs also. Those of you here in the United States also fighting a good fight against tariffs and stuff like that. I've had this conversation at the start of this podcast I guess it's 2 months ago now, just 2.5 months ago, when I talked about tariffs, how there's a lack of understanding what tariffs are and how they impact the people putting the tariffs on products. The people who are putting the tariffs on the products, their citizens actually pay the tariff versus the citizens sending the products into the market. So I'm not going to talk too much about that, but since I figured today was Groundhog Day, I wanted to make sure we don't have a Groundhog Year. What does that mean? What does that mean? I know many of you, if you're my age, early 40s, maybe late 30s, and even up to the folks in their 50s, you saw the 90s movie Groundhog Day. Sorry, the main character is in my mind, but I've forgotten his name. You all can put in the comments his name, but his face is in my mind. And he lives the same day over and over again in different ways until he finally breaks the cycle. I think that's one of the best movies I've ever seen in my life. The fact that I remember it, because I don't remember most movies. They're not the most attractive, I should say, things to me. I mean, in terms of, I don't really have connections to movies because it does not. When I don't attractions in terms of connection, I don't have that for movies. I like shows. I think they're much more informative. Their long form is more substantive, and it helps you become more invested in the process of the theatrical. So I'm not that invested in movies, but I do remember Groundhog Day because of the fact that I've watched the movie several times, which is a rarity for me. I usually watch movies once and I never watch them again. But I found that movie to be very informative in how you can go through life, do the same things over and over again, and have the same results. You wake up, you go to work, you do your work, and the same outcome happens. You do the same thing over, the same outcome happens without changing. And that becomes problematic in both the micro part of life and the macro part of life. In terms of micro part of life, it's your daily life where you are living it. You are engaging with others, you're engaging with friends, you're engaging with family members, you're engaging with coworkers, you are paying your bills, doing those things that are normative. But they become so repetitive that you become bored with it. It's something that's not fulfilling anymore. And you look for more, and that can either be a good thing or a bad thing, depend on who you are, your personality. Hopefully it's a good thing where as you search for more, you find other people to meet, other great activity to be part of, and you become more fulfilled. Now, on a macro scale, it's society. If the computer starts whirring here in this part of the episode, my computer's talking to me, so I apologize. And you guys know this is Mama Pop Podcast, Society Podcast, so you'll get these occasional interruptions from my computer that's always whirring its fan. But on the macro side, there is a constant repetitive aspect in our society where we elect one group, they do X, you become dissatisfied with them, and you elect another group, they do X, become dissatisfied with them, and the cycle repeats. We are in a situation where many people either did not vote or voted for a cycle that came before with expectations that it's not going to be as devastating as it was previously. And they're right. It's not going to be like the past. It's not going to be a Groundhog Year. Or I should say a Groundhog Quadrennial. Because we are entering a period of instability. And what do I mean by that? We are in a place where there's decisions being made that are outside the bounds of what we consider normative. Even in a chaotic cycle, you're now into a super chaotic cycle where things are not being implemented based on rational basis or ideological basis. It's being implemented based on, I feel that a person's feel it's a need to be done. There's no science. There's no quantitative tests. There's no qualitative tests for evidentiary proof that there's a need to take X action. It's just that the action must be taken because there is a compelling need in someone's mind for this action to be taken. And if there is no foundation other than a compelling need, that becomes a problem. Many in our society are underplaying what's happening here in the United States, now what's happening in Canada, what's happening in Mexico, and what's going to happen globally. I started out talking about misinformation, disinformation in my podcast, and how there's a corrupting essence, corrupting malformation in our society. And that was misinformation, disinformation. And decisions were made based on misinformation, disinformation. And now we are seeing the ramifications of that decision. Even though folks who made that decision are saying everything's fine. People know in their heart of heart everything is not fine. Something is very wrong. And it takes people of conscience to acknowledge the fact that something is very wrong. We are not repeating a cycle of 4 years ago. Or I should say 5 years ago at this point in time. We are in a new cycle that's more problematic than an old cycle. The interregnum of the Biden-Harris administration, that was necessary. That was good because there was limited chaos. Yes, there was events happening overseas that were horrific, but there was no internal chaos here in the United States, Mexico, Canada, and potentially in other parts of the Western Hemisphere. even though people would have, even though people framed it that way from different corners, which led to the events that we're facing right now. I keep on saying this is not a Groundhog Year. What you're gonna see will be something we've never seen in generations or ever. 2025 is going to be a defining year. And hopefully we make it through this year, and 2026 is impactful in a good way. Because we've got to make it through 2025. That's critical. There's going to be a lot of challenges out there. There's going to be a lot of decisions made that are going to impact people's lives for the negative. And that's really sad. So it is incumbent upon us to be resolute, be focused and engaged, and be watchful what's going on, and choose our points of engagement at strategic times versus consistently chasing everything down a rabbit hole. Will some of us do that? Yes. Because we know there's a need to constantly be assessing, engaging, going on the offense, influencing, dominating space, and achieving information supremacy, which is all part of the DAAM cycle. Because if we don't engage on those fronts become compounded, and they reinforce each other, and all of a sudden you're facing a wall of misinformation, disinformation, and very destructive variables that will impact society in a negative. I have concerns about what's going to happen. You know, I'm scared that we may have a recession when we should not. Because it's going to impact all of us here in North America, and then it's going to go global, since the U.S. is the most dominant economy in the world. If the U.S. is in a recession, the rest of the world would likely go into a recession. And that's not something we should ever want. We should always want a constant upslope, constant growth of our economy. That's what we should be rooting for, which is what I'm rooting for. Which is what I'm rooting for in Canada, Mexico, UK, all across Europe, all across Asia, Australia. Because we're all in this together. We're all in this great society. And if you're hearing screaming in the background, it was my daughters screaming in the background because they're playing with each other and doing crazy preteen/teenager stuff. Oh, having several children is really interesting. I love it. Just love it. And my two oldest are always at each other's throats. So you live and learn. But I love them to death. And we are in a time of stress and potential danger, where there are no persons who can say this should not go forward. More people are accepting of a reality which may be destructive to our society at large. And all of us must speak out about it. That we cannot have this path. Because we're living on this planet together. We're all part of this great international society, great global society, and if we don't step up, we don't speak truth to power, we don't get our voices out, a lot of stuff is going to happen. And that's a problem. In history, they always talk about why did folks not speak up? Living in the current age, I can understand why people don't speak up. It's because of fear. So those of us who have courage must speak up. In a respectful manner, in an intellectual manner, in a cogent manner, in a manner that's receptive to all audience, not in a braggadocious, contentious, condescending manner, because that doesn't get the message across. We must be stalwart, we must be nuanced, we must be thoughtful, we must be caring, we must be caring and loving in how we approach folks and try to convey information on what's going on. Not to browbeat folks over the head, because doesn't really get them to come to your side or think about come to your side. And we've got to help better improve their understanding of the effects of what's going on, how it's going to impact their lives. Because, as I said, this is not a Groundhog Year. It sometimes feel like 2020. This is not 2020. It has aspects of it, but it's likely not going to. It's going to go in a divergent direction, and we may see a lot of things come of it. Let's hope we can recover from this divergence. Because our children need to have a future to look forward to. All children, all societies. And just listen to my daughters reinforces why this is important. Because they must have a future to inherit. As I've inherited this current age from my parents. Am I optimistic? Yes. Am I slightly worried? Yes, otherwise I would not have launched this podcast, or I would not be speaking here. But I'm very, very optimistic about what we can achieve in this world. What is to be achieved in this world, even as we navigate this not Groundhog Year. Originally, when I was going to title this episode, it was going to be Groundhog Day or Groundhog Year 2, something of that nature, because I wanted to talk about its parallel with 2020. But I had an epiphany as I was creating a title. This is not going to be the Groundhog Year. This is going to be one of those years you remember going forward. Just like how we remember 2020, or sometimes we skip 2020 and go from 2019 to 2021 because there's sometimes a gap in our mind. This is going to be one of those years. And we must be optimistic that the year turns out right for all of us, even as we navigate these treacherous waters and fight against cutting winds and storms that are trying to buffet us to the left and right, and other various acts of nature, or in this case acts of man. We must be resolute, resolved, and focused to move forward together as a society because the future demands it. We must be people of good conscience and speak up and speak out to convey a message that we want a society that is together versus divided. We want a society that is unified, that is strong, that is vibrant, that is loving and caring for all. We want a North American society that is focused on elevating the region to a higher stratosphere. We want a global society that is that is focused on elevating the 8.9 or 8.8 billion people to better lives, better outcomes. So, as we navigate this not Groundhog Year, let's focus on helping each other, loving each other, caring for each other, and making tomorrow, the next day after that, a bright day for all. My name is Dr. DAAM. This is Dr. DAAM Podcast, episode 49, Not Groundhog Year. Please like and subscribe to my podcast. Have a great evening. Be safe.